there, and welcome to another episode of Sip Sip Hooray, the podcast for people thirsty for information about wine, minus the stuffiness that's sometimes associated with the wine world. On today's show, we're talking with a winemaker who's been entrusted to carry on a winemaking tradition of excellence at one of California's legendary wineries. Teresa Heredia is the winemaker for Gary Farrell Wines, which is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. We're excited to get to know Teresa, who, by all accounts, is making the brand very proud with her passion, drive, and artistry. We are the two Marys who like to eat, drink, and be merry. I'm Mary Babbitt.
I'm Mary Orlin. Teresa traded peptides for punch downs, leaving a doctorate program in chemistry for analyzing wine samples in a winery lab. She's worked at several notable places, but it was 10 years ago that she stepped into some big shoes at Gary Farrell Wines. Gary Farrell is the OG of the Russian River Valley, making wine there before the region became a recognized AVA. She works with fruit from storied vineyards, Rocchioli, Bacigalupi, Gaps Crown, and she will tell us about this very interesting concept of neighborhoods of vineyards. Teresa makes beautiful Pinot and Chardonnay, and if those are your jams, she is the winemaker for you to know. Teresa, welcome to Sip Sip Hooray.
Thank you both for thanks to both Marys for having me. I like to drink well and be merry.
That's our motto.
Friend already, so yay. Well, maybe we'll start with having you tell us, you were on your way to a doctorate in chemistry at UC Davis when you pivoted, and it pivoted to wine. Can you tell us how it happened and sort of the why of it?
Yeah, sure. So I studied biochemistry as an undergraduate at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. Now that was before they had even, thought to begin a wine program. And now they have a wine program there. Cal Poly is an ag school. So then after Cal Poly, after I got my biochem degree, I went to work at Amgen for a little bit in Thousand Oaks. And so I lived there for a hot minute. I got bored, decided to apply to grad school. At Amgen, I was, doing a lot of pipetting and, what seemed like interesting science, but it actually wasn't super interesting. So I decided to apply to grad school, got accepted to UC Davis, and, spent a couple of years working on my coursework and starting a graduate project there. And while I was there, I was a teaching assistant for general chemistry, and there are about 12 graduate students in total who are divided up to teach the lab for general chemistry, the labs. And so all 12 of us got together to grade the exams, and, we came from different departments. So I came from chemistry, some came from biochem, some from microbiology, and we had 2 graduate students who were from the viticulture and enology program. And so we sat there grading the 400 exams and exchanging stories. I talked about my research projects. They talked about theirs. And I realized that the foundations of the science that we were all using was the same, the fundamentals. And so we were using the analytical instruments. We were using the same statistics, and basically doing the same science, except I was doing peptides and they were doing wine. And I had already traveled to Burgundy, Bordeaux, and the Rhone Valley the year before that.
Just for fun?
Just for fun, yeah. Because the partner that I was with at the time, we both loved wine, or we were both getting into wine. He loved wine, and I was beginning to really understand and love wine. And so we went to Burgundy together during that trip, and that's when I had the first wow moment of wine. And so I was sitting there with these graduate students talking about chemistry and wine. I was like, wow, why is this not me? And so, within a short amount of time, I transferred into the enology program, and, fast forward, that's pretty much how it's all history from there. Fast forward, a couple months later, did my first harvest at Sainsbury in Carneros. And then after that harvest, I got hired on full-time at Joseph Phelps Vineyards, and they had already planted 100 acres of Pinot and Chardonnay out at Freestone. And so they needed somebody to take on the chemistry at Joseph Phelps Vineyards, and also take on this new vineyard that they had planted on the far west Sonoma coast,
right,
in Bohemian country. We're talking about Phelps cab producer. planting 100 acres of Pinot and Chardonnay out on the cool coastal, area.
Mhm.
And so they wanted somebody to take the reins in that project. And I was happy to get involved in it. In the beginning, it was just, we need somebody who's interested in Pinot and Chardonnay. And eventually I grew with it and, became the associate winemaker and then the winemaker. And then I came to Gary Farrell in 2012. So that's the short version of my story.
Yeah.
Wow. It's been a great path though. Those are all great places.
I forgot about Burgundy.
Oh, yeah.
I did Burgundy in 2006 too. I did a harvest in Burgundy. That was a
nice.
key factor.
Dang.
Yeah.
You've been on a path.
It's been fun.
Yeah.
to say.
So, you come to Gary Farrell, where Gary Farrell is a legendary name in wine. He got started before it became an AVA. He was instrumental in establishing the Russian River AVA. What's it like to work at such a storied place when you've been at some very other significant wineries, but he was such a name, such a presence. How do you make it your own?
That's a great question. So in the beginning, it was very, very difficult to get my head around the fact that I was coming into Gary Farrell Wines, right? Because there was such a big reputation, and I knew that they worked with some really amazing storied vineyards, and Gary himself had established such a, reputation for himself. And, being a pioneer of the Russian River Valley, coming in to fill those shoes was a daunting task. And I was, I was afraid that I didn't know enough about the Russian River Valley when I first came in. And so that first year in 2012, I started on May 1st, and it's about to be 11 years.
Wow.
So I came in and all the wines were still in barrel from the previous vintage. And so I tasted through everything in barrel, visited all the vineyards, and, kind of had a preliminary glimpse of what to expect. And then come harvest in 2012, I tried to use my own experience and also, respect the fact that these vineyards have long pre-existed me, and the style of Gary Farrell Winery long pre-existed me. So I tried to find a balance of, respect for what had been done here, the style of wines that they were making, and, bringing in everything that I had learned from Burgundy and the cool West Sonoma Coast called Freestone. And so, it was about finding the balance. And so I had some vineyards that, I definitely wanted to pick less ripe than what they had been picked in the past, because the team who was still working here at Gary Farrell, they and I agreed that, some of those wines were bigger and riper, not really, consistent with the style that we as a team wanted to produce. And so I had a very supportive team here. And so we did it kind of little by little, incorporating new techniques like whole cluster fermentation to, add some extra spice and complexity, and, to elevate some of the terroir expression in the wines. Extended maceration on Pinots, which just means that, after primary fermentation, you leave everything together. So the must, the wine plus the skins and the stems, if you use them, all kind of steeping together for a little while. Those are things that hadn't been done here at Gary Farrell before. And, picking a little earlier, changing from, medium toast and medium plus toast to more light toast barrels, just to help accentuate some of the purity and expression of place that we were looking to achieve.
I love that.
We incorporated small changes in the beginning. And I think, we're still doing that a little at a time.
And what do you think of the results you've been getting so far? Those are, you say, small changes done over time, but significant changes, and kind of giving your own stylistic mark on the winery. And what have the results been?
So far, we're all really happy with the results. I have two really delicious wines in my glasses here. I went ahead and opened them for myself too, since we're going to talk about them.
Right.
So the Chardonnays, just to highlight one particular varietal that's different. So I think the Chardonnays of Gary Farrell past, and also of Russian River Valley past, let's be honest, we're talking about, wines that were being made in the 90s and the 2000s. There was a trend, The trend was bigger, riper, a little bit more oaky, kind of more golden, unctuous fruit flavors. And now, things have tipped in the opposite direction. And so, the more respected and welcomed style now is lower alcohol, less oaky, kind of flinty reduction type of aromas, and fresh, pure fruit flavors. And so I'm really happy with the results that we're getting in the bottle.
Yeah. So this is the 2019 Olivet Lane Chardonnay, which I think it's just so, it's just the pure expression of Chardonnay. You know, there's a light touch of oak, but what I get is tremendous acid, really bright citrus fruit, a little bit of pear, and but it's just delicious, and it's not your typical California Chardonnay, which I really enjoy.
It's not, and we're very proud of that. It's just the goal, ultimately, the bottom line, our goal is to work with amazing vineyards, iconic vineyards, and be respectful of the fruit so that we can produce a wine that is expressive of place, a pure expression of place. And so Olivet Lane is owned by the Pellegrini family. So a lot of people know this vineyard. They're familiar with the name Pellegrini. They have their own wine brand as well, but they also sell some grapes. So the Olivet Lane vineyard is produced by Gary Farrell, Pellegrini itself, William Selliam, Mary Edwards makes a Chardonnay from there as well. So it's a really famous brand. And, if you'd like to have a fun Olivet Lane tasting, you can see the broad, differences in winemaking style from winemaker to winemaker.
That is such a great idea to do that, to find one vineyard source and taste how each different winemaker, different wineries who source the fruit, what they do with it, because I think that's really kind of fun that here's the same source fruit, but depending on the winemaker style, each one's going to have a slightly different characteristic.
Right. I love it too.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us about the Russian River Valley in general and what makes fruit from that area so special, and kind of the characteristics of the Russian River Valley that you find in the bottle?
Yeah. So the Russian River Valley is this really beautiful place. Well, where we are at Gary Farrell is we're perched on the top of a hill. I'm actually sitting here looking down right now. And you can see the line of trees that run along the river. So I can't see the water itself, but I know where the river is because I can see the line of trees that runs along it. So
Nice.
that is the defining characteristic. We have this beautiful river that runs through the valley, and the Russian River acts like a conveyor belt, pulling fog along the vineyards that run, alongside the river itself, and then up on the hills, on either side, on the east and west sides of the river. And the fog that gets pulled along the Russian River Valley helps to chill the fruit down at night. So one of the characteristics that's typical of the wines from here, and one of the reasons why Pinot and Chardonnay do so well, is because of that the cool nighttime temperatures help the wines to preserve acidity. Mm-hmm. And so the wines end up with a really nice acidic core, not too much, not too little. But then the daytime temperatures, there's a really beautiful diurnal swing in temperatures. And so you have warm days, sometimes hot days, lots of sunshine. We are in California after all, but then we have those cool nights so that the vines retain ample natural acidity. And so winemakers have the opportunity to either pick on the slightly earlier side, capturing freshness and purity and lots of natural acidity so that you don't have to acidify the wines as much, or you can lean towards the riper style, where you're picking riper to really capture that like succulent, voluptuous Russian River Valley fruit, and if people are looking for that style, you still get lots of wines from around this area that are tipping more toward that style. We have some that are a little bit more tipping toward that style as well, but it offers a range of beautiful wines, which is a beautiful thing.
Well, and I love the image of the Russian River being a conveyor belt, bringing that coolness in. That's a great visual for me.
One day during harvest, I was standing out, over our terrace, just overlooking our view, and it was early in the morning, and so the sun had come out, but it was still really foggy down below. And I took my iPhone and captured a video of the fog. You can see it moving along the river. It was like a milky river.
Oh, nice.
That is a great visual.
Yeah, really pretty.
Fantastic. So something that you all are involved in is what's called the Neighborhoods Initiative. Can you explain what that is and why it's important and how it impacts your winemaking?
Yeah, so it's a really important initiative. So the Neighborhoods of the Russian River Valley is an initiative that kind of started maybe it started in the mid to late 2000s. I don't actually know what year, but maybe even as early as 05, 06, 07. But winemakers and growers started talking about, the different microclimates within the Russian River Valley, and even broader than that, the different neighborhoods, the different regions within the Russian River Valley that have different diurnal fluctuations, different soil types, and you have different flavor profiles that go along with those different factors. And so, what they started to do is sit down and taste wines with other winemakers and growers in a blind setting. And we tasted everything, for several years in a row, pre-malolactic fermentation and pre-oak influence, or at least so that the wines were in neutral oak. So they had, very little oak impact. And so what we did is we had a worksheet each time where we wrote down descriptors for these different wines in a blind setting, and then later on grouped them together to try and determine, do these wines, Pinots in particular, does this group of Pinot Noir from the Middle Reach have flavor descriptions that are unique to the Middle Reach neighborhood, and so on and so forth. And so what they've done is they've broken it up into 6 different neighborhoods. I work with 5 of them. So it starts starting in the north, which is where we are. Gary Farrell Winery is located here in a neighborhood that's called the Middle Reach of the Russian River Valley. Mm-hmm. And it's most of the vineyards that are here in this neighborhood are in close proximity to the river. And we're the northernmost part of the Russian River Valley. Believe it or not, we're butting up against Dry Creek Valley. So temperatures get pretty warm here. So the Pinots from this neighborhood tend to be a little bit more succulent, really, vibrant red fruit, lots of cherry, raspberry, lots of black cherry. Tannin is present. There's earthiness to the wines, but the acidity and the tannins are not the dominant characteristic of the wines. They're softer and more supple and succulent, like Rocchioli and Bacigalupi, for example. And then you have, moving south a little bit, you have the Santa Rosa Plain, which is in the heart of the Russian River Valley. It's warm during the day, so the fruit ripens and creates these really like dense, opulent, dark color Pinots. But it gets really cold at night because the neighborhood's called the Santa Rosa Plain because it's flat. So cold air settles at night. So the vines really retain lots of natural acidity. So it's kind of like the balance of everything. You have the best of both worlds there with the rich, ripe fruit and the really bright acidity. Actually, the Pellegrini Olivet Lane comes from there. So hence the bright acidity. And then I'll make it a little bit faster here moving forward, but moving west from Santa Rosa Plain, you have the Green Valley neighborhood, which is actually a sub-appellation of the Russian River Valley. Right. That neighborhood was established the same year as the Russian River Valley, so in 1983. And so this year is the 40th anniversary of both that Russian River Valley and Green Valley. So those wines being close, the Green Valley is closer to the ocean, very sandy soil, cooler temperatures throughout the growing season. It's much foggier throughout the day. So the Pinots from there tend to be a little bit more blue and purple fruit forward, and there's a lot more earthiness. Acid starts to become a more important descriptor in the wines. And then south from there even is the Sebastopol Hills neighborhood, which is really close to the Petaluma Wind Gap. So talk about cold in Green Valley, the Sebastopol Hills is even colder. And so you get bright red fruit color in the Pinots and, really spicy characteristics from, the area is very windy. And so there are a lot of trees around there. And so you actually pick up some of the oils from the trees. And so I think it adds a nice complexing agent to the wines. And the acid is absolutely a defining characteristic of the Pinots from the Sebastopol Hills.
There's so much there.
Ridge. Yeah, there are 2 other neighborhoods.
Okay, go ahead. Let's hear them.
So Laguna Ridge is sort of between the Middle Reach and the Santa Rosa Plain. And, it has characteristics that are similar to both, but, kind of unique unto itself. I don't want to get into too much detail about that one. And the Eastern Hills is a neighborhood that I'm unfamiliar with. I don't work with the fruit, so I'm not going to get into it, but that's the concept of the neighborhoods.
Well, you've got a lot of stuff in those neighborhoods. I mean, a lot of great fruit and a lot of different characteristics. I feel like we should tell our listeners who might not be from California that the Russian River Valley AVA is on the coast of it's Sonoma and Mendocino County, but it's the western end of things. And so you get a lot of ocean influence.
You do, very much so. And these neighborhoods each help me to create my Russian River Selection Pinot Noir, which we don't have today, but it's one of our most important wines.
That's what I was going to ask you. Do you do a blend of these neighborhoods?
We do. So we make a blend of the Chardonnay and we make a blend of the Pinot as well. So our Chardonnay tends to be, between 4,000 and 6,000 cases, and the Pinot ends up being between 8,000 and 10,000 cases generally. And they include vineyards from all over the Russian River Valley, and sometimes a small percentage from outside the Russian River Valley, depending on what we're looking for. But you can think of these two wines as kind of like the pastiche or the orchestra, and you have the single vineyards like the ones we have today that are the soloists.
Yes. Okay. I love that.
Yeah, that musical, again, another great visual for us, thinking in terms of the music and the orchestra, the supporting players and all of that.
Mhm.
One of the things I think is so fun is the different vineyard names in your area. Can you just give us like a list of some of the cool names of the vineyards, like Rocchioli, Bacigalupi. I mean, I can't even say them all, but
you have the Bacigalupi, you have Rocchioli, you have Pellegrini, Martinelli. So it's all these Italian immigrants who came and planted vineyards in the Russian River Valley. A lot of them planted vines between the 60s and 70s, some before that.
It's wonderful. Some of those old vines and what visionaries to recognize that they could make great wine there.
Yeah. And one thing a lot of people don't know is that in the Paris, the Chardonnay that won the Paris tasting in 1976, it was the 1973 Chardonnay from, oh man, I'm having a moment.
Chateau
Montelena. Chateau Montelena. The winemaker is Mike Gergich, but the fruit from that came from Bacigalupi. And not many people know that. They've been starting to talk about that a lot more recently, but that, everybody thinks that was Napa Chardonnay. It was Sonoma Chardonnay. It was Russian River Chardonnay.
I didn't know that.
40% of the blend.
Wow. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Huh. So you guys are celebrating a 40th anniversary.
Yes.
So tell me, how are you guys marking that at Gary Farrell?
We did a lot of special tastings, with media. We had a couple of, media dinners where we invited people to the winery to break bread and have a great dinner. And we opened up some older vintages of Gary Farrell wines and some newer vintages. And, we really just kind of honed in on focusing on our history. And I thought it was really special. It was a great year for us last year for that reason. Sadly, at the same time, we had to honor Joe Rocchioli, who passed last September.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there one of the older vintages of Gary Farrell that really make an impression on you that you just like, wow, this is just spectacular all these years later?
Yeah, actually, a couple of wines. One of them, like one of the first Gary Farrell wines that I tasted during my employment here at Gary Farrell was a 2004 Encounter, which is a wine that Gary Farrell Winery used to make a long time ago. And it was a cab-based blend. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was a blend of Cab and Merlot. And some of the fruit came from, or a lot of the fruit came from like the Sonoma Mountain area. So it was not from Napa, it was Sonoma Cabernet. And it was very much in the Gary Farrell style. And I thought it aged beautifully. So it was a 2004. And
right.
I think it was, sometime, maybe midway during my time here at Gary Farrell Winery. So, it had a decent amount of age on it. But the one that really blew my mind was a 1988 Russian River Selection Pinot Noir that I tasted from Gary Farrell about 5 years ago. And that wine was still alive, and it was showing its age for sure, but it just wowed me that the Pinot was still alive, because California Pinots, we don't drink them 30 or 25 or 30 years old. We drink them in their youth, really, because we're American. right? That's what we do. We're not the English. The English like to age them until they're almost dead and then drink them.
But we're not patient. We're not patient.
No.
And they're darn good young. So why not?
I know. So our wines tend to age really well because of the acid core and because we have some good tannins in the wines as well.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the Pinot that you sent us. This is the 2018 Hallberg Vineyard.
Yes. So this vineyard is located in the Green Valley neighborhood of the Russian River Valley. I told you that Pellegrini is located in the Santa Rosa Plain.
Mm-hmm.
So Green Valley, closer to the ocean. I was talking about the soil, really, really powdery, fine, sandy loam. It's Goldridge series soil. Mm-hmm. So the cool thing about that soil is that the roots can penetrate deeply through the soil because it's soft. And so the farmers have the opportunity to dry farm because the roots can penetrate deep enough to access the water table. And so they can pull some moisture on their own without having to irrigate. And so what that does is it allows the vines to really truly establish themselves without, assistance, and, produce grapes that are just really concentrated and truly expressive of the place. And so that's the beautiful thing about the Hallberg Pinot.
Yeah.
And so when I was telling you about some of the flavors that we pick up, the 2018 vintage is a little bit different than your average Hallberg year, because everywhere in Sonoma County, the Pinot crop was really big. And so the Pinots in general across the board, no matter where they're from, tend to have a little bit more, a little bit of a lighter color to them. They're a little bit brighter and more vibrant, which is a beautiful thing to me. But some Hallberg years like 2016, 2015, 2019 tend to be really dark, like the color of, like a boysenberry jam or something. And they tend to have, really beautiful structure, lots of tannin, really great concentrated blueberry, blackberry, huckleberry flavors. And that's pretty typical of Green Valley Pinots.
Yeah. What I really love is the minerality.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Yeah,
that's
that really
partly due to the earthiness and partly due to the acidity in the wines as well.
That's one of my favorite things about a good wine too. If there's a minerality in a wine, that automatically puts it in my favor. I love that. I love that flavor complex. I also really like the fact that all the wines that you guys do are so well balanced, and they really are kind of they are elegant wines.
Thank you. Yes, that's what we pride ourselves on. And you remember that we're not only making wines where the vineyard is the priority, we're making a wine that's site specific is a priority. We're also making wines that are food friendly.
Yes, that is so important. You don't want something that is going to overpower whatever you're eating. You want something that will be harmonious or in tune with what you're you're eating and drinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anniversaries are often a time to look back and reflect on where you've been, but they also can be a good chance to look forward and kind of maybe make a roadmap for the future. Do you have any thoughts about where you see Gary Farrell going as the wine industry starts dealing with more climate stuff? Do you see that impacting you guys, or do you want to hold tight to what you've been doing, or do you see yourselves really either expanding or tightening up? Just thoughts about where you guys are going.
Yeah, well, we're always on the hunt for, cooler coastal vineyards. And so, we have the unique thing about Gary Farrell Winery is that we're like a negociant, like a premier cru or a grand cru negociant producer from Burgundy. If you can imagine like a Nicolas Potel or a Bruno Claire, where they purchase all of their vineyards. Mm-hmm. They purchase all the fruit that they make. And we do the same thing, but we're always on the hunt for an estate vineyard. And so, we've got our eyes on vineyards that are out west, close to the Pacific Ocean, up north, maybe even Anderson Valley. This year, we're looking at an Annapolis Pinot Noir. So, basically what we're just going to do is hone in on the Russian River Valley and, keep an eye on the trend and just kind of embrace the natural swings of Mother Nature and keep our eyes and ears open for fruit that's out on the cool West Sonoma coast and north of us.
That cool stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Always on the hunt. That's interesting. Mm-hmm. What I want to talk about is the experience at Gary Farrell. I know that a couple of years ago, a new tasting room was unveiled, but there's also something about being a safe space and being open and equal to all communities. And I would love for you to tell us more about that.
Oh, yeah. So diversity, equity, and inclusion are very, very important to us. And we've made it a point to focus on putting some of those initiatives into action. And basically since 2014 or 15, we've been working with the Human Rights Campaign. And, as I myself identify as, part of the LGBTQ plus community. And, I have a wife. And so since I first started working here, I've been trying to push for inclusion, equality and inclusion, diversity, equity, equality and inclusion. And so we've been working with the Human Rights Campaign and some other organizations to try and, bring, some of those folks to Gary Farrell Winery, also to Sonoma County. And we like to give back to the community as well. So we're always donating. We donate to HRC. We donate to some other organizations. We donate wine or our time. Like we've flown all the way to Washington, D.C. to, host events with them. I feel like this weekend or this week sometime is the major donor leadership summit at the Human Rights Campaign. And that's something that we've donated for years. In addition to that, we're trying to focus on, broader areas of diversity. As a lot of people know, wine doesn't tend to invite people of color as much.
Right.
And so we're trying to figure out, working within Sonoma County and with our other winemakers locally, other, people in the industry, to figure out how we can break down those barriers. And mostly I want to worry about how I can break down barriers at Gary Farrell.
I think that's fantastic. And I guess I'm curious, how have your efforts been met, both at Gary Farrell and beyond? As you said, someone who identifies as LGBTQ plus and is interested in promoting equity, diversity, and inclusion. How do you find that people are ready for that in the wine world, or are you getting any resistance?
Oh, there's been resistance. We have there are a lot of old school people in the industry and outside of the industry as well. And so, we have a lot of people who would rather kind of leave things as they are and not disturb the peace. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And whereas I'm trying to explain, as I'm working with other individuals who are educating me on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And, I'm having a better understanding of how, if a winery wants to stay relevant for the long term, you want to bring younger people, right? Younger people want diversity. So I think that people have to embrace it. You can't just continue to market your wines to the same group of people forever and ever, because eventually they're just going to age out.
Sure. And how do you market or approach these more diverse communities? Is it different from how you would market and approach kind of the typical wine community that you've had as customers traditionally?
That's what we're trying to figure out. See, that's one of the bigger areas where we're trying to dive into it and understand how we can market to, more diverse communities. But I think it comes down to outreach, taking advantage of connections with people in different parts of the industry. So, working with media who live in different communities, and, with influencers who live and write and record videos for different communities. We have to think about the different socioeconomic groups who are out there as well.
Sure.
So we want to do tastings in Oakland and maybe in East LA. I'm just throwing out some examples, and reaching out to different universities in different parts of the United States as well, where we may not have reached out before.
Sure. Oh, I think that's a really great point about the socioeconomic diversity, because that's something that doesn't really get talked about a lot in wine.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
Yeah. If you want to keep being relevant, you have to keep bringing more people into the tent, as I say. You've got to keep in giving people reasons to find you and giving people ways to find you.
Yes.
Sure. And again, wine comes in all sorts of price points, and I know you all do some wines that are more value driven than some of your like single vineyard wines. And I think that's probably something. Are you seeing success in going to some of these communities that aren't traditionally wine buyers, and they're more open to that because of the price points?
Mm-hmm. Well, we haven't done a lot of that yet. Those are in our goals. Okay. Those are some of the initiatives that we're trying to put into action to bring our wines to different communities. And I can't answer that because we haven't done it yet. Mm-hmm. But I would hope that they'll be well received, because we do have wines. We have our Russian River Selection Chardonnay retails for $35 a bottle.
I took note of that. I was pleased.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing to think about. Some people may think that's not inexpensive, right? People who are just getting into wine, that's like maybe mid-level for them. And our Russian River Pinot is 45 going up to 50. But when you think about the fruit that goes into it, it's really affordably priced. Sure. And our Hallberg Pinot is only $55 a bottle. Our Olivet Lane is $50. So you have two wines here that are $50 and $55. Right. To some people that might be really expensive, but for most people, I think they can say, okay, that's pretty fairly priced. Right.
For the right reasons and the right occasions, it's a great price.
Absolutely. Yes. It's not going to be your everyday wine, but if you're having folks over, if you're doing a special dinner, you're celebrating, or just, want to have a really great wine experience because you've had a great week or whatever,
Mhm.
you can, it's a little splurge, and
Yes,
why not?
definitely. Tasty splurge.
Absolutely. That's amazing. So, what are people going to experience when they come visit Gary Farrell?
Well, they have this beautiful tasting room that you mentioned earlier, and that I forgot to address. So we opened this beautiful new tasting salon in about almost 6 years ago now, in July of 2017. We opened this new salon where we have ceiling to floor windows overlooking the beautiful view, and it's all seated tasting. So you have a host who takes care of you and is there to pour you the wines that are on your menu, and possibly even wines that you see on the other side of the menu that you're interested in purchasing. They might even have some to pour for you. So it's a really great one-on-one experience for people, and we pride ourselves on that.
And where did you say this is?
So we're located at 10701 West Side Road in Healdsburg, California.
Healdsburg.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we will put all that information in our show notes for this episode.
Yes,
Great.
Absolutely. Hey, one of the things we'd like to ask our guests is what you do when you're not making wine and when you're not, doing wine biz. What are some of the things that you like to do to recreate and unwind?
Oh, yeah. Well, first and foremost, I love travel. So I'm glad that, post COVID, we have the opportunity to do some travels now. We just got back from Europe, an area of Europe I had never been to. So we were in Central Europe, in Hungary and Austria and the Czech Republic. And then we went to Berlin and Prague for a few days. So that was great. That was the first big trip we've taken since COVID.
That's awesome.
But when I'm just home and in my car, I'm super into music. So I'm really into audio equipment. I love playing records. I have a big, huge record collection. So.
What kind of music are you into?
All kinds. I love hip hop. I love jazz. Those are actually two of my largest chunks of my collection. I have, probably about 500 hip hop records, and similar with jazz.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Well,
Yeah.
I also understand that you are not just into audio equipment, you're an audiophile, that you have some pretty, amazing equipment. Can you tell us about some of it?
I would identify as an audio enthusiast. So here's the thing with the audiophile term. Audiophiles are kind of looking for that perfect sound. They're looking for that. So I'm not really searching for that. I just really, I geek out on audio equipment. I just love it. It's really beautiful and it's fun to hear the differences between, different types of audio equipment. And, like I have a really nice turntable preamplifier, 2 mono amps. And, I'm also into how things look. I'm not just into how they sound. I'm also into the aesthetic appeal of the equipment. So I'm looking for really pretty stuff. It has to sound great and look pretty.
Oh, that's cool.
So, I don't imagine that the Russian River Valley is a hotbed of clubs to go hear hip hop music and stuff. So this is just something you're doing on the side. And the jazz, are there jazz clubs you're going to, San Francisco? Like
there are, but no, I don't frequent the jazz clubs. I'm listening to it at home. To be honest with you, I wasn't really very into jazz until probably, I don't know, maybe like 6 or 7, 8 years ago. And, my ex, who we became best friends and really listened to jazz together, she got me into jazz. She told me I should listen to John Coltrane's A Love Supreme.
Oh, yes.
And I did. And I did. The first time I listened to it, I was like, oh, okay, like you really got to be in the mood for that. But then I put the record on my really nice turntable at home and turned the lights down and had a glass of wine. And I was like, okay, I get it. I get what it's all about. It's all about the mood.
For sure.
And that's how I got into jazz. Then I just started listening.
Yeah. So describe your audio setup at home right now. What would we see if we were to be in your home and you're playing some music for us?
Yeah. So my main audio setup is sitting in my living room, the same room where I have my TV, but it's on a different wall. So I have an old Garrard turntable, which is a turntable that was originally built in the 50s. And so this is an original one, but it has been refurbished, rebuilt. So it plays like a new turntable, but all rebuilt to original specs.
And is it like in one of those consoles the way they used to be, the big, like they were kind of built into big old wooden
Yeah.
console deals.
It's in a really beautiful big wooden plinth. It's called a plinth.
Nice.
And there's this guy, I think he's in Ohio or Idaho, I can't remember which, but he's known for these rebuilds and these boxes. He builds these plinths out of, specialty types of wood and just builds them to be really beautiful. And so it has some gold feet that I bought at a different website, kind of, brushed gold feet, which tie into some of my other decor in the area. And then I have a preamplifier that's chrome, and then 2 mono amplifiers that are also chrome, different manufacturers. The preamplifier has this really cool, it has a light feature. So you have a switch on the back, you can turn it on and it kind of illuminates with blue lights behind the knobs. And so it's really beautiful, ties in really nicely to the look of the Garrard.
Wow.
And I have a CD player as well, but that's not really the most aesthetically pleasing thing. It's kind of off to the side.
Wow, that sounds awesome. So do you have any influence on the type of music played at Gary Farrell, either in the winery while you're working or in the tasting room?
They use I believe it is a Sonos system. So no,
Right.
not really.
Yeah.
But in the cellar, I bought our stereo. It's not a component system or anything. It's just, I looked online and I bought us it's like a big boombox. It looks like something from the 80s and it's Aiwa. Do you remember the Aiwa brand, AIWA, from the 80s? Aiwa. If you were into audio at all as a kid, they made tape players and boomboxes. So anyway, this one is a current device, but it looks kind of like an old school boombox, except it's not intended to carry on your shoulder like a boombox.
That's fun.
So
yeah.
What are your barrels like best?
Oh, the barrels like all kinds of music. We play everything. It kind of depends on what the interns are in the mood for. So Peter, our cellar master, plays a lot of jazz. He and I share that love. And so the barrels actually do enjoy listening to jazz.
Well, cool. I just love that. I love that you're so passionate about music and you take it to that next step, which is you're passionate about the way it gets played. It's important that you have the right sound system. I think that's very cool.
Oh yeah. My speakers are these old Tannoy Cheviot Legacies. So they started making those again. They're kind of old school speakers that they just relaunched and started making them again. So they also have this like gold color that ties into the turntable feet.
I can see it. I can see the setup. How fun is that?
I love it. It's really great. It taps into my, artistic side, I guess my appreciation of art, I suppose, and music.
Give us an update as we get ready to wrap things up here, Teresa. Give us an update on what's going on with you in the vineyards and what's keeping your weeks busy lately.
Well, I got back from Europe and was back at the office last Monday. So we jumped immediately into blend tasting. So we're looking at our Chardonnay blends from the 2022 vintage. So we finished, one round of tastings last week, and now we're doing another round of tastings this week. So by probably tomorrow or the next day, we'll be finished and we can wrap up all those details and start getting the wines ready for bottling. So we'll bottle some Pinot Noir in June, and then we'll bottle the Chardonnays in July. And then harvest happens and all the rest of our vineyard designated Pinots stay in barrel until January or February of the next year.
Well, this being the 2023 vintage, California has had record snow, rain, cold through the spring. So bud break was late this year. How is that affecting the vineyards you work with? And what do you anticipate in terms of harvest dates being normal, being delayed?
Yeah, so everything's late. Bud break was 3 to 4 weeks behind last year. Really, most things were like a solid month behind last year. So we expect that harvest will start late. It may not be a full month late because, the spring temperatures and summer weather will probably, bring things a little bit closer to the typical average. So we may be picking, 3 weeks later than last year.
Mm-hmm. But in terms of all that water, is that in any way bad for the vines? I mean, we all got a ton of water in California, but I imagine Sonoma County and Mendocino County up that way, they may have gotten more.
We did get a lot of water, a lot of rain, and we were flooded here in the Russian River Valley for a number of days. And So the timing of the heavy rains was pretty good. It started in December, like around the holidays is when the heavy rain started. And it seemed like it kind of never really stopped except for a day here and there, maybe a couple days of sunshine and stuff. But it seemed like all the way through my departure to Europe on March 29th, it was still raining. And so the timing was good, though, because bud break hadn't really started yet. There were early signs of bud break. You could see what we call the popcorn, which is when the buds are starting to swell. But we didn't see any, buds actually opening up yet. And so the timing was good. So the vines were, dormant in the winter when we got the heaviest rains. And then, the cold temperatures and the heavy rains through pre-bud break was okay. So it's now forward that we have to be concerned about the weather, and frost is the biggest issue. So yeah, we've got a lot of water in the soil, and that should be good. That should be good for the vines. Hopefully it's good for everything, really.
Well, we are wishing you guys a great year, of course. But sometimes I know that, years where the vineyards don't produce as much end up being really great wine years, like, 2015. I'm trying to think of some other ones back in
2011.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know what to wish for. I just hope you I hope you continue to make great wine. How's that?
Thank you. I appreciate the well wishes always.
Absolutely. Well, Teresa, it has been so great getting to know you more, talking audio equipment, and of course, gorgeous wines from the Russian River Valley.
Thank you both so much. This has been really lovely chatting with you.
Well, yes. And let me add, thank you for making all of it so understandable, palatable, and fun for us. As you speak about, the neighborhoods of the Russian River Valley, et cetera, I really felt like I learned something today, but it was done in a fun way. So thank you.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks so much. I try to keep it friendly and approachable.
And I just learned a new term, popcorn. I didn't know that's what the buds before they actually break out were called.
Yep.
So
yeah, because they start to look white. And if you look closely at them, they look like popcorn kernels.
I like that. Okay. Popcorn, wine popcorn.
All right. Well, we're going to say thanks again and sip, sip, hooray to you, Teresa. Continued success with Gary Farrell. Congratulations on the 40th anniversary. And here's wishing you another 40 more.
Thank you again. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Well, that's our show for today. Thanks so much for listening. Mary Orlin, what a joy to talk with Teresa Heredia. She is so cool. And I just love, in addition to how talented and down to earth she is, I love her efforts at making Gary Farrell and wine in general more equitable and diverse and inclusive. Good for her.
Absolutely. We need more people like that in the wine world to bring in LGBTQ plus communities, to bring in BIPOC communities. The wine industry has a long way to go, but, by her and Gary Farrell making their winery a safe space and being inclusive and inviting folks in, no matter their background, the fact that they're thinking about how can we appeal to wine drinkers in a variety of socioeconomic circumstances, I think is really great. And being mindful of, we need to bring younger folks in. We need to bring in Gen Z and introduce them to wine and make this a place of community.
Absolutely. So Teresa Heredia is certainly one to keep watching. She's a mover, a shaker, and a really talented winemaker.
And her wines are really delicious.
Really, really good. Bottom line, great wine.
Well, thanks for joining us. And we will put all this information in our show notes, the wines we tasted, where to find Gary Farrell, how to go taste there. We urge you to go visit. It is a beautiful, beautiful place.
Yeah. And we want to thank you also for listening to Sip Sip Hooray, our podcast. And we invite you, if you enjoy our show, please leave us a comment. Let us know that you listen, that you like what you heard, or maybe you learned something. If you engage with us, that helps us and it helps more people find us.
Absolutely. So yeah, give us a review, give us a rating on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. Follow us on social media. We are at Sip Sip Hooray Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Leave us a comment, leave us a question. Let's engage. Let's have a conversation. It's not just me and Mary talking at you. It's me and Mary B wanting to also listen. If you've got ideas, we welcome them. You can also get more information on our podcast at sipsiphooray.podcast.com.
Absolutely. All right, Mary Orlin, it's time to say goodbye and sip, sip, hooray. Cheers to you.
Cheers to you, Mary Babbitt. Sip, sip, hooray.